Howdy everyone, and welcome to Saturday's show. And as promised, today's show will be a big focus on Wilfried Nancy, who we expect to be named as the new manager of Celtic early next week. Almost certainly on Monday, I would say. I've been speaking to a few people this week who know about him. Favian Renkel is a soccer writer. He follows the MLS and has met Nancy on several occasions. And Jonathan Smith is a radio host in Columbus, Ohio, and a Columbus Crew supporter. So a big thanks to those two for giving up some of their time to inform me and all of you as well all about Wilfried Nancy. Big video today. I think it's the longest one we've ever done. So just sit back, relax, and hopefully you can learn a fair bit about our incoming manager. Also, just a big thanks to Practical CBT for sponsoring the show. If you're a guy looking to get your head into a better place, just like you train on the pitch, they have got 10-minute online workouts and coaching sessions that can make a real difference. And as a Celtic AM viewer or listener, you can get a big discount as well. The link you need is in the description. Also, and don't worry everyone, I'm not going to sing, but this is the day. This is the day we get to 19k. I feel it, everyone. We're like 100 away. If 100 of you watching this, just click that button that takes 2 seconds and is completely free. We will be at 19k. So enjoy today's video, and I'll be back properly Monday first thing looking back in the Hibs game. So we've got Favian Renkel on. Favian is a soccer writer. I was going to do the American accent there, but I didn't do that. Calling it soccer's enough. I think you're over in San Francisco at the moment. Favian, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, look, I write about the American game, all the way from the 5th division to MLS. I've worked for Leagues Cup in the league, and that's a competition we have here with the Mexican League. But I definitely prioritize MLS and soccer here in the US as a journalist. And I've always went ahead and made sure to cover as much as the corners of the US as it's so big as I can.
And you're moving to New York in the coming days because you've got a new job there as well. So exciting times for you and exciting times for football. I'm calling it football in the States at the moment. Obviously, World Cup. Next year, reminder everyone, Scotland are going to be there. So you're going to see lots of the Tartan Army in the States, which is going to be great. Cameron Carter-Vickers, though, sad news that he might miss the World Cup through injury. And obviously sad news that Wilfried Nancy looks to be leaving the States as well. So lots is happening.
Yeah, Ryan Gauld and
oh, God, I've not thought about Ryan Gauld in about 15 years. Dear,
and then
dear.
Lewis Morgan, 2 guys that are on the fringe Scotland squads, so... hopefully maybe, fingers crossed one of them makes it so we have some MLS representation on that team, but we'll see.
What's Ryan Gauld doing these days? Who's he playing for?
Honestly, he's in the semifinals with the Vancouver Whitecaps, and he was injured all season, but when Thomas Mueller went to that team, he's kind of like the co-captain or Batman and Robin, and they have a good chance of winning MLS Cup this season.
Okay. Right, okay, talking about Wilfried Nancy then, you were one of the many US soccer figures to tweet positively about Nancy after news of his move to Celtic was reported. You tweeted, MLS just lost one of its best coaches today. Nancy will kill it at Celtic. Another tweet from you back in March 2024. You said, the way he has led his Columbus Crew is truly sensational. I'm in awe almost every week. Everyone should appreciate Nancy before he moves on to coach bigger clubs in Europe. So fair to say you're a big fan.
Yeah, no, I think Nancy's done a great job here in the States. He's gotten the best. So something that we have here in MLS that is not like the rest of the world, or at least it's a little stricter, is the salary cap. And Nancy's never been at a club where, they've had guys like Son Heung-min or Lionel Messi. He's had guys like Acucho Hernandez, but that's not near the level of those other twos that I talked about. And I have a feeling that he's a very good coach in a way where he can get the most out of his lowest players. And a lot of guys that I know personally have said that he's the best coach that's ever coached them, right? I've talked to many players on the Columbus Crew where they felt like they would run through a wall for this guy because he's one of the best speakers, 2, very connected to his locker room, and three, he plays a very attractive type of football or soccer that you don't really see in MLS. MLS is usually physical, it's usually fast in terms of physical speed, but in terms of playing out the back or having the center backs being ball playing center backs in modern football, yeah, you see that, but in MLS, that's very, very hard to see. And I almost want to say he's changing the way MLS plays because sometimes you see Columbus come out and they just dice up. And I mean, dice up some of the best teams. Take a look at the MLS Cup final in that match against LAFC, where LAFC had great players like Giorgio Chiellini, and you see these regular, MLS average guys just slicing up one of the best defenses there was in MLS in this biggest stage. So no, yeah, Columbus is definitely losing easily the best coach in MLS at the moment, or what, or top two, and it's tough because we all knew this day was going to come, and I think Celtic has the right man. I truly think with the budget that Celtic has, with maybe a little bit of patience coming in halfway through the season for Celtic, I think they would have a great kind of marriage here because Nancy is a guy. He's a philosopher. He's going to come in to get all the guys around him. He's going to bring in some guys, but I truly think Celtic is going to be playing a beautiful style of soccer. They're going to be playing with passion. They're going to be playing for the crest, and they're going to be ready to run through a wall for their coach. And I think that Celtic is taking a gamble, yes, on an MLS coach. But if you're gonna take a gamble with an MLS coach, this 100% would be the guy over the last 10 years, in my opinion.
Are you surprised that people in Scotland maybe aren't feeling exactly the same way? Like, I think a lot of people are positive about this. There's a fair bit of kind of cynicism, I guess, as well. Mainly, I think, because like not many of us follow the MLS. Not many of us. I can only speak for myself. I hadn't actually ever heard of Wilfried Nancy
Yeah.
prior until a couple of weeks ago. I also hadn't heard of Ange Postecoglou before we got him. So I guess I think that there's, just because you haven't heard of someone, clearly that doesn't mean that they can't be amazing. But are you surprised maybe with some of the reaction in Scotland to Nancy?
Yeah, honestly, I am. I think a lot of the news, or at least the bad press around him, is from people that I feel like don't understand the league. I mean, in MLS, you don't get teams that are level teams. There, you don't have a win percentage of 80%, and that's just unheard of, right? One, the travel; two, the salary cap; and then three, you're not really trying to win the table because you don't really need to. I hate to say that, but there is less pressure at the top. I mean, you're going to make the playoffs, of course, but over half of the teams make the playoffs, right? So this is something where you're going from a league where there maybe isn't as much pressure over to a league where you're getting a lot of pressure, but there's still other things that Wilfried Nancy did in MLS and in other competitions versus Liga MX teams that no other team has ever done. If I'm not mistaken, the Columbus Crew under Nancy were the first team to win 3 matches in CONCACAF Champions League in Mexico, which is something an MLS team has never done. And in Mexico, they don't have a salary cap. They can pay as much as they want for their guys. So you get these off balance kind of teams where Mexican teams would have like 13 to 15 DPs, designated players is what we call them in MLS, while Columbus only has 3. So he's getting the most out of every single player on that roster. And when you're doing that, when you're going to the pinnacle of Mexican soccer and showing them that you guys can compete and are a team to be worried about, I think that's excellent coaching, especially with what your hands tied behind your back with the salary cap that is in MLS.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, Jonathan.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Columbus, basically became a soccer fan when we got the Crew back in 1996. So that was my first kind of foray into that. But then that was when I was in high school. As you can tell, I'm old. So so that was in high school when the team came in, and that was a perfect time. I was young. I got a job out of high school not long after that, disposable income, season tickets. They were cheap. The beer was cheap. We would, I don't know if they do this in Europe or in various parts around the world, but we like to tailgate here with American football with our, NFL and stuff. So the tailgate culture at crew games was a lot of fun, and that was kind of what I got into at first. And then I started watching the games and actually learning a bit more about soccer. So yeah, that's kind of my background. Just a fan, but I've watched a lot of crew soccer over the years, and then expanded that into watching other teams as well.
So, I mean, as you say, you've been watching Columbus Crew for a number of years. How do the last 3 years rank under Wilfried Nancy?
I am trying not to be hyperbolic or anything, but they are probably three. I would say at least 2 of those years were 2 of the best years I've seen of this team. This most recent season, they had a lot of changes with the team, some injuries, some players that left. The team traded away a player very early on in the season that was very special to the team. So Cucho Hernandez, they traded him away right at the beginning of the year. So that kind of put a damper on this season. I don't think they ever fully recovered from that, but that wasn't, I don't think that was a Wilfried Nancy decision. There was a whole lot behind that he wanted to play for his national team, and they stubbornly believed that if you don't play in Europe for his national team, they thought maybe that would be a better shot for him. So he went over to, I believe it was Real Betis is where he ended up. But
yeah,
anyway, the 2 years prior to that were, so, I mean, prolific offense, some just joyful soccer. It was just so different from the previous regimes that had been here the last probably 10 years before that. And that's a lot of the credit goes to Wilfried Nancy, certainly.
So what is it that was so good about Wilfried Nancy's time at Columbus Crew? Is it just the winning? And obviously you won 2 major trophies. You got to the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup and lost that. Or was it more than that? Was it the style of football? Was it more than that?
I mean, I would say the style of football definitely was a part of it, because we had previously, not to give you all the Crew history that I'm sure everybody's not tuning in for that, but previous to this, the Crew had won MLS Cup during the pandemic. That was the 2020 season. So that coach, Caleb Porter, 2 years later was fired because the team missed the playoffs the 2 years after that. So, and obviously we have playoffs here. It's, part of our American sports lore. But, so that was something that his previous system, Caleb Porter, was very rigid. You have to be in a certain spot. You don't leave that spot. If you leave that spot, he drags you out of the stadium and flogs you. Like, you just, how dare you upset the delicate balance of Caleb Porter's system? Then Wilfried Nancy came in, and he talked like a poet, and he would just say things like, he had a line after they won MLS Cup where they asked him, like, how did you do this? Because he basically played a style of soccer that everyone said would not work in MLS. And he said, they said, how did you do this? This seems impossible. And he goes, impossible is an opinion. And everybody's like, print the t-shirts. We got the slogan for the team, but yeah, so it was, I'll tell you, the first year when he came in was when they won MLS Cup, the kind of the big trophy. But like you said, they went to the CONCACAF Champions Cup finals. They won the Leagues Cup, which is another, as you know, there are a million cups now. We're all trying to make money off of them. But that first year, there were quite a few hairy moments early on where we thought, they would give up goals because they would just be very far forward. They would be attacking like crazy. And you would think, oh my gosh, how are we going to survive this? But then as the players started to realize they could make a few mistakes and they wouldn't get screamed at, they wouldn't get told that they were off the team or sitting. Once they realized they had that freedom, it really opened up what this roster could do. And a lot of the roster was here, he brought in some players for sure, but he was able to just unlock something with this roster that the previous regime had not been able to do.
Yeah. Celtic fans will be watching this and they'll have heard bits about his tactical style, but they will be wondering, how is this going to look when you watch Celtic play? We know about the back three and the different formations that the the kind of setup that he goes when you've got the ball, when you've not got the ball. How would you? And also, I mean, we got a comment. John McCabe had tweeted me asking, what is this standing on the ball to draw opponents out looks like, and how does that adjust to the 10-man defence that Celtic face every single week, because teams come not to beat Celtic but basically to try and stop Celtic winning. So yeah, tell us a bit about the playing style. What's that drawing opponents out thing?
Yeah, so I feel bad because I may have contributed to that by kind of my posts where I said, he's going to mystify you in his press conference with some of these things that he'll say where you're just like, wow, because he'll talk about joy, and he's got a bit of a Ted Lasso, if Ted Lasso was French, but not that he doesn't know soccer, just that he has a very inspirational way he carries himself. But then I also said, yeah, he'll stand on the ball. His team will stand on the ball, and you'll get mad about it. It isn't standing on the ball. We had a lot of coaches the last 10 years, the previous two coaches, who did a lot of empty bucket formations, as we called it, like, I'm sure you've heard that, like just kicking it around to kick it around with no real direction as to why they were doing it. This team, it's not that they'll stand on the ball at the, in their own 18-yard box and just, do that just to do it. That does happen depending tactically on what the game calls for. Some teams in MLS are absolutely high press teams that will chase everything. And so he eats those teams alive. But also they'll get into the final third. And if they're given possession, they'll do it there. They'll do it 40 yards from goal and just say, I dare you to come get it. And at some point there are just players who take the bait. And I've never seen anything. I can't say I've never seen anything like it, but it's very rare. It's the type of thing that you see the richest clubs in the world do. You see like Real Madrid has done this. Some other teams have done this, where it's just like, we know our players can do it. We have confidence in them. And occasionally it does lead to turnovers that are shocking, right? But he doesn't mind players taking risks. I think that was the biggest thing that I understand about Brendan Rodgers, is that from what I gather, he was pretty risk averse.
Yeah.
He was right. That is a definite change you will see from Wilfried Nancy. He is not afraid to have his team, take those risks, take chances, be brave. He wants his players on the ball. You'll see a lot of games where it's one touch and it's 25 passes, and suddenly they've broken the whole thing open. There's other games in the MLS Cup final that they won against LAFC. LAFC had better manpower, more talent. For those who don't know, Giorgio Chiellini, it was his final game ever he played with LAFC. That was his end of his career. And I got to watch it, which was kind of cool. And I got to watch my team beat him. So that was also cool. But but in that game, it's like, that's a back line that's captained by one of the greatest defensive minds in soccer, right? In football. And they ate his lunch. And they did it by passing. They would possess the ball in the final third. They had their defensive, their center back is up 40 yards from goal, from, the opponent's goal, making a pass unlike anything I've ever seen. And it was all built on drawing players off into wrong positions, moving their players around, being tactical. And it was a total difference from what he had done previously in that playoff series. So it's not as if he will have his players just stand on the ball to stand on the ball. It is based on what the game calls for. And I'm sure when he gets to Scotland, I don't mean to sound so arrogant or confident in this, but I don't think he'll come in and say, well, this is what I do and that's it. He looks at what he has. He looks at the situation and says, okay, what would this call for? And then he encourages his players to take risks that would maximize their chances of beating whatever they're going up against.
When you're talking about Mexico, there was an interesting story I came across. Was there something about Columbus Crew training with oxygen masks before a game against Pachuca, I think, which is a stadium that's located around 8,000 feet above sea level? So he's quite kind of out there with some of his approaches to things.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of controversy around that game, and there usually is controversy around an MLS versus Liga MX Champions League final, because I think now it's 2 of the 3 times they've reached the final recently. They've had If it's in Mexico, they've had stomach flu the day before, and that happened to Columbus, that happened to the Vancouver Whitecaps. Um, there is, dirty tactics that are used in CONCACAF Champions League. I mean, there's a league that wants to stay up top, and if you believe it or not, it still comes out. So no, Nancy has a great system. He's not scared to use, for example, oxygen masks to help his team. And I think his team feels a little bit safer and a little bit more like he has their back when it comes to having trainings like that, where we're going to make it so that you have every single thing you need to succeed at any altitude or at any away stadium possible. And I think Columbus has a great way of showing that. If I'm not mistaken, he also has the team come together and wear suits up into the match, every home match, and I think they stay in a hotel together. He does have certain things to make the camaraderie of the team feel a lot better. And they have if I'm not mistaken, he started a walk-in for Columbus where all the team would walk in together with their suits, kind of like a national team vibe. And that's something that he will go to bat for, where making your team feel like they're brothers in a unit together. I was there when he won MLS Cup in that locker room after when they beat LAFC, and the guys didn't want to celebrate unless Nancy was there. And once he came in there, every single player made sure to dump champagne on him because he was just a part of that team as the players. I mean, this is one of the only teams that I felt like personally that I've been in their locker room, and this felt like a family. This felt like this was a true team win. I mean, yes, there were superstars, and yes, there was players like Cucho Hernandez that thought they were bigger than the whole program. And Nancy wasn't scared to suspend him. Nancy wasn't scared to put him in his place, and they still succeeded with all of that, even without their best player. And losing a best player due to troubles off the field is something that's so hard for MLS because they can only have 3 DP players, and Nancy still stuck to his guns and made sure that his team performed without their star player.
It's funny you mentioned family a minute ago, and there's also a quote I came across. Aidan Morris, who is a former Crew player, he's now at Middlesbrough. He was quoted, and you might have been here at the time, he was quoted as saying, "It's tough every single game. I have a good game. He will come up to me and tell me what he wants me to do better." It's like a father figure almost. So he's clearly demanding of his players, but they also seem to love him, as you just said.
Yeah, look, there's a player that I've covered in his career profusively, and it's Max Arston. I watched him when he was a player that was in the second division of MLS, and then Columbus took a chance on him, drafted him. I know this is weird for all the Scottish people listening to this, but we have a draft that happens every year where you can take college kids. He was on the Quakes second team, and that's where I covered him. He was then drafted by the Columbus Crew, and usually in an MLS draft, you're not seeing your best talent. And now gave him the opportunities to succeed, gave him a chance to get the starting role. And now Max Arfston is playing for Pochettino in the United States squad, right? So this is a guy who will give you a chance. Nancy will give anybody on this roster a chance. And if you succeed for him, he's going to let you stay in that starting roster, and he's going to give you chances. Arfston has had bad games, but he still had chances to succeed. He likes what he sees on the training grounds. And personally, I think that's what a player wants to play for. He wants to play for a manager that will see the opportunity for him and be flexible with starting 11s and be flexible with earning a starting spot.
One worry some people have raised is that his lack of managerial experience. He's only been a manager for I think 4.5 years at Montreal and the Crew as well, although he's been coaching for a long time before that. What would you say about his lack of experience?
Personally, that is a fair assessment, right? Let's see how long you can do it before you take the job. It's like applying for a job where you need 10 years of experience, but you've only worked 4, right? But I think he's the man for the job. Even if he doesn't have the 10 years of experience that you're needing. The Columbus Crew experiment was definitely something that it was a huge success, brought tons of championships to Columbus. And he played with an arm behind his back because he didn't have Messi, he didn't have Son, he didn't have these superstar players that LA and Miami and New York get, Rather, he was in Columbus and he made that team a powerhouse. And he did it in Montreal too. He's the first coach to be traded for assets in MLS from Montreal to Columbus. Columbus had to pay like a transfer fee, and I think that's the first time that happened in MLS. So this is a generational coaching talent that was actually linked to the USMNT job before Pochettino took it. Right, like this was a guy who American fans were okay with choosing a domestic coach. If it was gonna be a domestic coach, it was gonna be Nancy, and they were perfectly fine with that.
Tell us just a bit about his playing style, and I know it's probably difficult to outline it all, but quite an exciting way of playing.
Yeah, I mean, he plays three at the back, and his center backs can go all the way forward. He has faith. He has confidence in his center backs. I think the first thing you're going to see is him hammer down those three kind of positions in the back because they have to be a certain way. They can't be your old school type of center back. They have to be agile. They have to be almost converted backs, outside backs, because Steven Moreira is a center back who plays for Cape Verde, but he was a converted left back and he became a center back. And they have to be able to play a good ball in. If you go back to the MLS Cup final where Columbus was in, it was a ball from the center back all the way to the winger, and it completely sliced that defense. And you got a goal to go up in a final pretty easily. So expect those positions to be the first ones he does. And then his wingers. I mean, his wingers are expected to be wingers, and they're not expected to go track back and do too much defensively. And they're really going to excel being those wingers. If they're offensive minded wingers, they're going to honestly probably have their best seasons ever because they're just going to have to worry about offense. Now, his defensive mids and his midfielders are going to be expected to be pacey. They're going to be expected to cover those outside back positions that the wingers aren't going to. He was lucky that he had Aiden Morris here, who's another player who possibly can make the U.S. Squad for the World Cup. And then he also had one of the best players in MLS of all time, Darlington Nagbe, a guy who played for USA, won 4 MLS Cups, and had true experience in that midfield. And he's probably going to look for that again because without that, his system is going to be a little tough to kind of convey to a new side, right? He's going to need basically an experienced player who's their captain in the middle. And then offensively, he's been able to get the most out of a lot of guys. Of course, when you have a superstar striker, a superstar guy up front, you're going to be able to truly succeed. But he's been able to succeed this year, not as well as last year because he had Cucho Hernandez before he left, but he can get offensive production out of like a tall striker as well. Jason Russell Rowe is a guy who is a young guy who's been able to bang in a lot of goals, a tall, athletic kind of striker build. Before that, it was Christian Ramirez, another guy who is tall and athletic. So he's going to need one of those guys on the roster. But expect a ball playing kind of 10 and then another bigger guy to come in to be the 9 for the squad too.
Right, everyone, just a quick break from talking about Wilfried Nancy, because if there is one thing that's more unpredictable than the MLS end-of-season playoffs, it's your online security when you're not protected. Yes, this video is brought to you by NordVPN, the VPN I use to keep everything I'm doing online safe, fast, and totally private, just how I like it. With NordVPN, you can browse securely in public Wi-Fi, protect your data from snoopers, and even switch your virtual location. So if you're abroad and want to be able to watch the football you would normally watch from back home, boom, one click. The best bit though, you can grab an exclusive deal using that link in the description, nordvpn.com/Celtic AM. And they have a 30-day money-back guarantee, huge discount. What have you got to lose? Get sorted with NordVPN.
The team they set a record with the Crew the first year he was here. I can't remember if it was 78 or 79 goals in 34 matches. So when I say stand on the ball, like, if that's what he thinks will work that day, then yeah. But like, I've never seen a team that was as offensively talented as this team that we had the last couple of years prior to this season with Wilfried Nancy. Not in Crew history have we had a team that was that prolific. So if you want to see offense, if you want to see a team that's going to be bold in attack, like, I don't think Wilfried Nancy is going to come there and just encourage the team to sit back and wait. Like, It's very tactical. One of the things he said a lot that I had kind of forgotten about, but as I was going back through some of his, greatest quotes and some of his press conferences this week, just reflecting on him, he talked a lot about how he feels that soccer players and coaches have an obligation to entertain as much as win. Like he is of the opinion that this should be fun. This should be a game that we enjoy. It shouldn't be a slog. If it's a slog, why are we doing it? So for those who are worried that, like, again, I think I did a disservice by kind of saying he'll have his players down the ball. When he does it, you're sitting there, and I mean, you're on the edge of your seat because it's a team that's chasing, and it's a team that's like trying to. He's dangling a carrot in front of a team that he knows is going to take the bait more often than not, and it's hairy. You sit there and go, "Oh my God, they look like they're going to lose the ball every single time," and then 30 seconds later, you're in on goal with a great opportunity. So, but I don't think that's going to be necessarily every single match out there. That's not, I don't think, the plan. He is someone who definitely seems to believe that this game should be fun and the fans should be rewarded for coming out, and they should be rewarded with some play that's exciting. Not that they don't want to win, obviously, but he feels the way to do that is to encourage his players to take risks, be bold, be brave, and not just sit back and be boring and because that's safe. He doesn't like the safe thing at all. So,
yeah. And I mean, people might hear that and think, oh, have we hired someone here who, would rather entertain and not win than not entertain and win? But he's a total winner, and you've seen that so far in his career in the States with, Montreal, obviously Canada, and in Columbus Crew as well. He's won trophies, got a really good cup team as well. One thing that has been raised that you will probably have seen is the question of whether Wilfried Nancy can deal with the pressure of Glasgow, where football is the only thing that's spoken about basically in Glasgow. Is he made for that, do you think?
I definitely think it's going to be an adjustment. I mean, Columbus, Ohio, our number one thing here is the Ohio State University, our college football team. They actually played Michigan this weekend, which is that's our Rangers.
Right.
We hate them. It goes back generations too. They fought a war over Ohio State and Michigan, over a piece of land. So that's our rivalry. But so like this week in the news here, like this has made the news, but it's not the 24/7 coverage. It's so that is something that will be different for him, is going to a place like that. One thing, I mean, I tend to think he will handle it well, but what I would say is I think one of his faults, or something that would be something that he has to watch himself with, he is not necessarily careful with his words at all times. And sometimes he will just flat out say something that may upset people. And he'll say it with, he'll say it with a confidence of, I don't see how anyone could see it any other way. And so sometimes seeing some of the commentary and obviously getting some interaction with Celtic fans this week, I can guess that if you're not measured with your words, it ends up front page and ends up blasted all over. Yeah, right. And so, obviously English is his second language, but he speaks it well. I'm not, trying to disparage that or anything, but I do think he will probably at times seem a little flippant with some comments that he'll make, because he'll look at it as like, that's, like I said, there's a little Ted Lasso there where he does have a little bit of like, why wouldn't I say that? That's what the truth is, he ruffled some feathers, not to get too in the weeds, but the Crew got bounced from our playoff system here, and Major League Soccer has changed its playoff system literally dozens of times.
Yeah.
But the current iteration, they play 3 games, and it's a best of 3. Unlike anything pretty much in world football anywhere else, right? Like usually you play an aggregate or you play a one-off or a home and home aggregate, right? So in that series, the Crew lost 2 of the 3 games to a much better team in Cincinnati, which is that's a Crew rival. And after that series, he said, hey, if you look at the aggregate, we actually won the aggregate. I don't understand why we do it this way in MLS. And he was kind of critiquing the MLS system, but it did come off to fans as like him saying, we should have won. It kind of came off as sour grapes.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like, no one sprung this playoff system on you. We all knew what it was. It wasn't an aggregate. It didn't matter that in the second game they scored, I think, 4 goals, and the other 2, Cincinnati won like 2-1 and 1-0, I think,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. So he tried to make the case about the aggregate thing, which he was making a larger point, but it definitely ruffled feathers. It sounded like sour grapes. So that's just an example of he'll just say what he thinks sometimes. But one thing I've learned about Celtics supporters, and I certainly have, I saw was that the meeting of the board this past
Oh,
week?
you going there, dear, oh dear. I thought we were avoiding that.
Well, what I noticed was I get the vibe that a lot of Celtic fans are not happy with the board.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you go back to his time in Montreal, the reason he ended up in Columbus in the first place, the owner of the Montreal team is named Joey Saputo. He's a very fiery individual, and you may have heard this, after a game, he didn't care for some of the tactics Nancy had done, was in the dressing room, basically kind of letting people know he wasn't happy about that. And Wilfried Nancy basically screamed at him and said, "Get out of my dressing room. You're not welcome here." And this is to the owner of the team. So I'll say he's a complex figure for sure. But I do think there's certainly a universe, if we live in the multiverse, there's a universe where he comes in and is somewhat of a voice for the fans and maybe speaks to ownership maybe a little bolder than others have. There's also certainly a universe where that board is giving him a chance that no one else has in Europe. So I don't know how that will play, right?
It's interesting that, isn't it? Like, will he? Because I expect him to come in, and I mean, he's clearly not going to criticize the board right away, but also he's not going to criticize the fans right away. And the media in Scotland are going to ask him at his first press conference, how are you going to deal with all of the noise that's going on? So it's going to be interesting how he responds to that. I think he'll probably, as I say, kind of distance himself and say, look, I'm just here to concentrate on the team. But as things go on, it'll be interesting what kind of road he goes down with that.
He, for sure, I think that's exactly how it will play out, at least to start. He strikes me, again, and I cover the team not in the way of someone who's at every press conference, who's, I am more of a commenter who just watches the games and gives my opinions, right? But in the limited time I've interacted with him and the little bit of, what I've seen of his press conferences, I mean, he does strike me as someone who is very perceptive of what is important to the fans. And in our experience here, that has been one of the more important things for him, is to always make sure the fans understand some of what he's doing, and also to understand what the fans want and why the fans maybe aren't satisfied. Now, he came in year 1 and looked as dominant as any coach we've ever had. So it's not like he's walking into the situation. He was walking into a situation here where people were very pissed off at the previous owners or the previous coaching situation. I don't think it's anything like what you guys are dealing with right now, to be fair. So that's going to be a new thing for him, right? And the pressure, like you said, is going to be ratcheted up. I can give another example too, if this is helpful. So the player I was talking about earlier that left the team right at the end of the winter window, the transfer window in the winter of this, so 24-25, right? Cucho Hernandez was, a prolific scorer for us. Certainly one of the face of the team, I think, if anybody was, and just a brilliant 9 that it's hard to quantify just how good he was, but we all loved him, right? He was a fan favorite. He was an MLS MVP. He was everything. He was one of the best players in the league. And so when previous to him leaving, this was in 2024, there was an issue where he kind of got subbed off and stormed off the field and said something to a trainer and just kind of walked off and went into the locker room, kind of left the bench. So the next game he didn't play. And Wilfried Nancy was asked about that. And he, after the game, said, yeah, there's a punishment there. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to answer your questions about it. He's being punished, and I'm handling that internally. And then when it came to, well, what is he being punished for, or what did he say, or how long will this be? He said, I understand you want to know these answers. I'm not going to tell you. He just was very blunt. There was a reporter, Brianna McKay, who covers the Crew here locally for our local newspaper. And she, she's asking all the right questions. He said, Brianna, I know you're doing your job. I respect that you're doing your job. I will not answer these questions. It's between me and the player, and it's handled, and we're good. And we've talked through it, and there's no more. I'm not going to put this out there in the media. So he will protect his guys too. Which again, I know can be frustrating, right? Especially, that's kind of how Ohio State is for us here. When the coaches don't want to talk about something, everyone loses their minds. But if they win, that cures all of it, right? Well, sometimes. Sometimes.
Just quickly, do you think he'll go back to the MLS in January to sign players?
Personally, a guy who we talked about earlier, Max Arvston, would be the kind of price range that you can get quality in MLS. It's going to be that 3 to 5 million euro price point, because guys like Diego Rossi, who's on that team already, or Wessam Ali, a guy who Celtic wanted earlier in the season, is going to be too expensive. They're going to be about 10 to 15 million euros, and I don't think Nancy is going to go to MLS if he has that type of checkbook. But a guy like Max, easily, you can get him in 3 to 5 million, and maybe you get a couple of a little home discounts because you're Wilfried Nancy, right?
Or the opposite. Columbus could
Yeah.
make him pay more, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, but a lot of times in MLS, these guys, at least if they're young enough, they do want to go to Europe. So sometimes you can get them to kind of force their way out. Nancy, of course, being in the league, understands that there's a lot of players like that, so he could easily take advantage of that. But personally, I don't think, if it's not a guy from Columbus, I don't think he's going to be looking too much within the MLS system, because he probably would already have them on his team.
Okay, that's interesting. I know you've spoken to Wilfried Nancy in the past. How is he to interview? What kind of answers do you get? How did you find him as a person?
Yeah, look, as a person, he's easily probably the best coach I've ever talked to. I was on the field. He recognized me, and he's like, "Hey, how was your night in Columbus?" He went the extra mile to remember me and to talk to me. I mean, he's coaching the All-Star game where he has superstars on the fields like Busquets and Jordi Alba, and he's standing there talking to me how my night in Columbus was, right? And I'm this. I don't want to say I'm this crazy journalist, but I'm just a nobody, and right? And he's on the, I would say, a pretty big stage for all of MLS, and he's taking the time to talk to me about coming into his city, right? So this is a guy who's full of life. This is a philosopher. He is a great speaker to the press, and he has beautiful sound bites that I think Celtic fans are going to love and fall in love with the way he talks about the game, because I'm South American, I'm Uruguayan, and this is pretty normal for us in South America, where they romanticize the game. But in MLS, you don't really get that. So when Nancy talked about the game in a press conference and really romanticized about the game in English, that was actually something to really kind of tune in and listen to, because you don't really get that.
Yeah, another quote I saw that you'd posted: "I like to have goosebumps when I see my team play." So he does seem quite an inspirational guy, and I think you're right. I think, the Celtic support, we're in, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we're in kind of bad need of someone inspirational to come in and for us to really get behind something, because it's quite fractured at the club at the moment. And I have the feeling that Nancy could be this guy that I think when he speaks, people will fall in love with him. Obviously, he has to get the results as well, which is the big thing, because he's coming into a struggling squad. We've got a number of injuries. You'll know about Cameron Carter-Vickers, and Alistair Johnson's injured as well. Like long-term injuries, these guys, 4 or 5 months. I think Carter-Vickers is out for the rest of the season. Uruguayan Marcelo Sarachi, who you'll probably know, he's out as well at the moment. So there's a lot of injuries to deal with and a lot of other stuff going on at the club. Do you think he can come in and still win games right away?
Yeah, look, I I believe when he took over from Montreal to Columbus, Columbus was the team that didn't make the playoffs. So that means they weren't even in the upper 50% of the league. The next season, they were able to lift MLS Cup. And I think if anyone's going to come in from MLS as a coach and win right away, it's going to be Nancy. And he's going to be able to get the second and third guy to be able to easily kind of play up to the position that he needs them to. I would say that level of player, I would say the second or third guy at Celtic is probably very similar to the MLS average guy or like, the basic kind of MLS player. And I think he's going to know exactly what that talent level is and what to expect from each player. I think the transition's actually going to be a little easier than if it was a big European coach coming in from Serie A or the Premier League, where there's some adjustment to understanding the talent level and what to ask from them. So I truly think he can come in to Celtic and win games right away because he knows the talent level. He's done it before with Columbus, and he's going to be able to kind of give a lot of these players a chance, to win their spot, because they fit a new system possibly for them.
Yeah, we've got a lot of games coming up. I think we've got 2 games a week for the next 3 or 4 months. So he's not going to have much time on the training ground to actually work on things. Do you think he'll come in straight away and he'll have this 3 at the back for the first game and he'll have all his methods, or do you think he'll take a little bit of time to introduce these things?
That's interesting because thinking of Nancy, I've never expected him to be a coach that doesn't instill his formation. It would be interesting to see him do something that's not 3 at the back. And that would be much watched television too, because I would love to see how a team like that would do. But no, I expect him to come in and do what he wants to do. And if it, possibly doesn't work the first game, he's used to 2 times a week because in MLS, sometimes you do get double match weeks. And I think if anyone's going to be used to two matches a week, it would be him, right? So there's little tips and tricks that I think he's going to instill in a team right away, where I feel like they're going to have a cohesive unit from the get-go. And just like I was saying earlier, there's things behind the scenes where I feel like he can do to make that team feel together, and I think they're going to buy in pretty quickly.
Anything else, Favian? Anything else in your mind?
Look, if the United States fan base was excited to possibly get this guy, I think Celtic fans need to realize that this was domestically the best coach that we could even, hope for, right? And he's not even he's probably an American citizen now, but he wasn't someone on the U.S. radar going into this World Cup cycle. And there were fans that were confident that he was going to be able to take us through this World Cup cycle. But we ended up landing a guy like Mauricio Pochettino, of course, with the heavier price tag, but we were totally fine with Nancy at the helm for the United States men's national team because he's a philosopher. Guys are going to run through walls for him. Guys are going to be able to hit pinnacles of their game that they were never expecting, because a confident manager in his squad is something that a lot of players usually don't have. I feel like the talent level is going to be almost on par with MLS. Maybe Celtic has some guys that are way better, right? But still, the second and third guys is going to be very similar. And I think that transition is going to make it way easier.
When people don't really know too much, it's general ignorance, I guess, because we not many of us had heard of Wilfried Nancy. I think you kind of, and it was the same with Ange Postecoglou, who you'll know, who was our previous manager, and he came from, Japan, Australia, and people didn't know anything about him. So there is an element of history repeating itself. But people assume, I think, that these people, Nancy, he's not going to know about Scottish football, which I think is incorrect. I think he'll have, he's French as well, so he'll know about Scottish football, he'll know about European football, he'll have been following that throughout his life. And also, people make the assumption, I think, that these people are going to be quite kind of weak and they're not going to stand up for themselves, and they're going to be pushed around, and they're just going to be happy at Celtic, and they're going to let the media talk to them how they like, and they're going to let the board talk to them how they like. From whatever you hear about Wilfried Nancy, it sounds like he's the complete opposite, that he's a real kind of strong-willed figure, and people are going to find that out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I tend to think that's correct. remember too, and not to bring this aspect into it, but he is the first coach in Major League Soccer history who was black, who was able to win MLS Cup, right? So like he has dealt with some of that, um, people doubting him, people questioning him. He was aware of all that. He was asked about those questions, and a lot of like he was asked about what does it mean to you, and he would dually address the fact that like it is special to him, but he also hoped that that wouldn't be the only thing that he was defined by. Like he wasn't either. He didn't ignore that side of it or that talking point, but he also didn't throw that out there as like that's the only thing I want you to think of me, right? Like he kind of he knew the situation going into it and had some really good answers on that, some really thoughtful answers that I would encourage people to go, look up. Because he obviously can speak for himself better than I can on that. But he's felt pressure, I'm sure, not to the level of this. But one of the guys that's going to come with him, it looks like, is Kwame Empadu, who is an assistant coach for the Crew. And his background, I mean, he played for the Irish youth team. He played most of his soccer on the British Isles. Like, I mean, this is someone who's very familiar and reportedly very much wanted to be a part of this project to go to Celtic. So I think if he had any questions about what is Scottish football like, I think he's going to have, his right-hand man who's been with him since Montreal is someone who seems to be at least should be pretty aware of, the landscape there. I realize he's not someone who's coached in Scotland for 20 years, which would probably be more helpful. But it's not as if he and a bunch of guys who've, again, I made the Ted Lasso comparison. It's not like it's a bunch of American football coaches coming over and giving this a shot. Like he definitely is aware of the world game.
Final question. Do you think he's going to do well? I guess he's got a tough start. He's not really got a time to work with the players on the training ground. We've got 2 games a week for the next 3 or 4 months. He's got a number of injuries. Can he do this, do you think, in the early days?
Well, that was something I was going to ask you is what do you think the runway is for someone coming into that situation, right? Presumably, if he's going to be given the rest of this year and then an off season and then hopefully, a good start next year, I would think that's the amount of time. Like when his first few months when he came to the Crew, there were a couple games. There was one in particular that sticks out against Cincinnati, which Columbus, Ohio and Cincinnati, Ohio are an hour and a half away from each other. So that's our closest, rival. That's a pretty important match for us. And they went on the road and he was trying out a new goalkeeper, Patrick Schulte, who now is in the U.S. national team pool, but at the time was a very much unknown commodity. And he made a terrible pass out of the back that was an instant turnover and an instant goal. And the team had another turnover early that was, they were trying to be aggressive and they were over pursuing, gave up the ball. He had a rush the other way and it ended up being another goal. And a lot of people were like, oh gosh, this guy takes too many risks. And he's, that was the concern with him. So it did take a couple months for the team to kind of get what he wanted to do. But I do think that he will probably have to be smart about the fact, and he will be, that he's going to look at the players he has and says, he'll look at it, I'm guessing, and say, what are we missing from these players? What is it that they should be doing that they're not doing? What is it that they want to do that they've not been allowed to do? Because I think one of the genius things he's done in Montreal and Columbus is he's taken the pieces that were already there and encouraged them to go take risks, go try things. And I think if that's been the problem before with this roster, that would be something that I think he will be very good at least in the long run, encouraging players to be themselves. But in the short term, yeah, I think there could absolutely be, and this is where that it can go very wrong. You have a couple bad results, and then he comes out in a press conference and says, hey, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry. And everybody loses their minds when he's not, feeling their frustration, maybe seemingly. that could be certainly a recipe by January where it could get pretty hot, if the results aren't there, or the play isn't where it's wanted to be, So I'm not at all not trying to disparage that or say that it's not valid criticism. I just think everywhere he's gone so far, he's handled that criticism and unlocked things that previously were not seen by other coaches. Other coaches did not do what he did with those rosters. So that's the encouraging thing I would say for Celtics fans, is that you should hopefully see him unlock some things with this roster that maybe you've been wanting to see for a while. I'm going to guess he's probably seeing similar things.